Damascus, Syria, September 14, 1260. Beneath the towering citadel, the air is thick and damp. The light of oil lamps flickers across a stone floor that glistens, not with water, but with something darker. At the center of the chamber kneels a woman. Her wrists are bound behind her with silk cord. Silk, not rope, chosen carefully because silk leaves no marks. Her name is Catherine of Acre, 23 years old, daughter of a Frankish merchant who once believed that trade contracts could shield his family from the storm of war. But 3 months ago, when the Mamluk armies reached the city gates, those illusions turned to dust. Catherine is not alone. 17 other women line the walls, backs pressed to cold limestone, faces pale in the lamplight. They range in age from 14 to 42, all Christian, all captives from the same campaign, all waiting to learn which of the 3 doors in this chamber they'll be taken through. Each door leads to a different fate. And though they do not yet know what lies beyond them, they've learned enough during 90 days of captivity to understand one thing. The Mamluks approach human lives with the same calculated precision they bring to war. The center door opens. A man enters unarmed, dressed in a simple steward's robe. Yet the way the guards straighten tells everyone here that this man's authority runs deep. His name is Emir Tashamor. His duty, though seldom written in history, is to oversee the integration of captured people into the Mamluk social and economic order. Integration, a clean word masking a reality so intricate and deliberate that few could fully grasp its cruelty. Tashamor walks past Catherine without a glance. He stops before a young woman no older than 16, her features marking her as Armenian. He speaks to her in Arabic. She doesn't understand. He repeats in Armenian. Her lips tremble, color drains from her cheeks. She shakes her head. He nods once to a guard. The guard leads her toward the left door. As the door opens, Catherine catches a glimpse of what lies beyond. A courtyard, where dozens of women sit in lines, heads bowed, while men in official robes inspect them like livestock. Then the door closes again. Tashamor continues, selecting with a rhythm that slowly reveals a pattern. Age matters, origin matters, health matters most. But something deeper guides him too, something unseen. Each woman is asked a question, spoken in her native tongue. The words change, but the purpose remains constant. He is testing their capacity for transformation, because the Mamluks understood transformation better than any empire before them. They themselves were once slaves, boys purchased, trained, reshaped into the most formidable warriors of their time. To them, transformation through bondage was not an atrocity. It was a method, a formula for power. Tonight you'll see what that method truly meant, how an empire of former slaves turned its mastery of transformation into a machine, one capable of converting thousands of human lives into instruments of state, economy, and obedience. Before we continue, understand this. What follows is disturbing. It must be, because these women lived. Their pain was real, and their stories deserve to be told, not with the comfort of distance, but with the raw truth history tried to forget. If you're ready, we return to that chamber beneath the Damascus citadel, to the moment when Emir Tashamor finally stops in front of Catherine of Acre. To understand what Catherine faced, we must first understand the world that created her captors. The Mamluk Empire was a paradox, an empire built entirely by men who had once been slaves. Every sultan, every commander, every emir had started life as property, purchased as boys from Turkic tribes in Central Asia or the Caucasus. They were taken to Egypt and Syria, where they underwent years of intense training, military, religious, and psychological. By their 20s, these boys had become elite warriors. By their 30s, they commanded armies. And when the Ayyubid dynasty collapsed in 1250, it was a Mamluk general who seized the throne. Their rise created something the medieval world had never seen before: a ruling class of former slaves. Men shaped through total control now wielded total power. To them, transformation through captivity wasn't a crime. It was proof of what could be, achieved with discipline, conditioning, and complete domination. If enslaved boys could be turned into generals, Then conquered populations could be molded into anything the state required, and the Mamluk state required much. At its height, it ruled over Egypt, Syria, Palestine, and Western Arabia. It defended Islam against Mongol invasions from the east and Crusader assaults from the west. It guarded the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, controlled Mediterranean trade, and taxed the lifeblood of the Silk Road. Such vast power demanded endless human fuel: soldiers, servants, artisans, concubines, and slaves. The Mamluks built an infrastructure of acquisition that operated like a machine. In Damascus alone, 7 major processing centers functioned by the late 13th century. These were not prisons. They were factories of transformation, facilities designed to categorize and reshape human beings. Catherine's chamber, deep beneath the citadel, was one of these centers. It specialized in high-value acquisitions, those with education, status, or beauty that made them valuable to the Mamluk elite. Other facilities processed captives in bulk, turning them into laborers who built roads, managed irrigation, or maintained the growing cities of the empire. Every person was assessed, recorded, and repurposed with chilling precision. The Mamluks' genius for administration, what made their armies unstoppable, was the same genius they applied to people. They did not simply conquer, they organized conquest. The Mamluks approached human control with the logic of engineers. Their processing centers ran like military campaigns, planned, timed, and measured. Contemporary records describe the method. Within 24 hours of capture, each person was given a medical examination. Then came classification: age, origin, physical health, and skill. Each factor determined which transformation track they would enter. The process lasted 60 to 90 days. During that time, the captives were stripped of everything that tied them to their former selves: language, posture, habits, even prayer. Each stage was documented. Losses were calculated. Productivity was tracked. The Mamluks believed that if a system could train men to become perfect soldiers, it could train women to become perfect servants, companions, or administrators. But women required a different kind of precision. They were seen not just as labor or reward, but as instruments of social engineering. The integration of Christian and Armenian women into Mamluk households served multiple purposes. It weakened rival communities, erased alternative identities, and symbolized total victory. Each woman absorbed into a Mamluk home was one less potential rebel and one more bond between conqueror and conquered. This was not chaos. It was policy. Regulations dictated how captives were distributed. Officers chose first, soldiers next, and the state always claimed a fifth. Markets handled the surplus. Every transaction was legal, recorded, and justified under religious law. And yet beneath this veneer of order lay a reality too dark for most histories to acknowledge: a world where human identity was disassembled and rebuilt piece by piece. When Emir Tashimur finally stopped in front of Catherine of Acre, she was trembling. He spoke in flawless Frankish French. His accent was perfect, proof of his study, his precision. The Mamluks did not merely conquer. They learned the languages of those they subdued. "Can you read?" he asked. Catherine hesitated. Lying might save her, she thought. Ignorance might make her less valuable. But something in his eyes told her he already knew the truth. Her father was a merchant. Merchants educated their children. A lie would expose her. "Yes," she whispered. "French and Latin. A little Arabic." Tashimur's expression didn't change, but his posture did. He gestured to a guard who handed him a waxed tablet inscribed in Arabic. "Read this." Catherine studied the script, a line of religious poetry, and read it aloud. Her pronunciation was uncertain but clear enough. Tashimur nodded, marked something on his parchment, and moved on. Catherine had just sealed her fate. She would not be sent through the left door to labor as a servant, nor through the center door to be sold in the markets. She would go through the right door, the door reserved for captives of intelligence, education, and potential. 3 days later, she was taken there. Behind that door lay another chamber, smaller, quieter, its walls covered in carpets that swallowed sound. 5 other women waited, educated, multilingual, frightened. Then a woman entered, older, composed, her gaze steady. Her name was Sophia, and she had once stood where Catherine stood now. Captured 20 years earlier, she had survived the same process and risen to the role of instructor. What Sophia would teach over the next 60 days was not faith or language. It was erasure, the art of unmaking a self. Sophia's lessons began the next morning. Her voice was calm, her gestures deliberate. She had no need to raise her tone. The weight of her presence did the work. The first week focused on language, not learning Arabic, but forgetting Christianity. Certain phrases had to vanish. Invocations to Christ, the Virgin, or the saints. Only God willing remained permissible. Every conversation was monitored, every word corrected until the old language of faith disappeared. Week 2 turned to the body. Christian women moved differently than Muslim women. Their posture, their gestures, even the way they met another's eyes marked them as outsiders. So Sophia rebuilt them from the ground up. How to walk, how to sit, how to bow. Hours of practice until the body forgot what it once knew. By the 3rd week, Catherine and the others were learning household management. Not cooking or cleaning, that was for lesser captives, but correspondence. Record-keeping and etiquette for high-ranking households. Catherine's literacy made her valuable. She learned to write in the formal Arabic style used by the Mamluk elite, to address nobles correctly, to manage letters of trade and alliance. But the 4th week held the hardest lessons, lessons that could not be practiced, only endured. Sophia spoke of what would be expected from male members of the household. She explained it not with cruelty, but with precision, like a teacher describing arithmetic. "Resistance is waste," she said softly. "You are an investment. Damaged investments are discarded." Catherine had seen what discarded meant. The broken women sold for labor in the lower markets, their faces hollow, their bodies failing. She understood. Survival meant obedience. By the 8th week, she no longer recognized herself. Her movements were graceful, her speech fluent. Her thoughts no longer rebelled as they once had. The transformation was complete. The Mamluks had discovered what modern psychology would define centuries later, that under total control, human identity can be rewritten. Catherine had not been broken. She had been rebuilt. 3 days later, Catherine walked through the right door. It led not to freedom, but to a new kind of captivity. Quieter, more refined and far more dangerous. The chamber she entered was smaller than the first, its walls covered with rich carpets that muted every sound. 5 other women waited there, all educated, all fluent in multiple languages, all young enough to be reshaped. Their instructor, Sophia, entered with the poise of someone who had long accepted her role. She had once been like them, captured, trained, transformed. Now she trained others. For 60 days, Sophia guided them through the architecture of obedience. The 1st week erased faith. The 2nd reprogrammed movement. The 3rd rebuilt their purpose. The 4th confronted them with the darkest lesson of all, submission as survival. By the end of their training, they were not prisoners in chains. They were something else entirely, reconstructed identities, designed to blend seamlessly into the elite households of Damascus and Cairo. When Catherine looked at her reflection in a polished bronze mirror, she no longer recognized the merchant's daughter from Acre. Her face was the same, but her eyes no longer pleaded. They calculated. She had learned that survival depended not on defiance, but on the careful performance of compliance. By the 9th week, Catherine's transformation was complete. Her new assignment, the household of Amir Kalawan, one of Sultan Baybar's most trusted commanders. A man who would one day become Sultan himself. The transfer was formal and efficient. Guards escorted her in a closed sedan chair through Damascus streets. Papers were signed, payments recorded. Catherine's price, 600 dirhams, a fortune that reflected her value as a trilingual, literate and trained administrator. When she stepped into Kalawan's residence, she entered another world. His estate spanned an entire district. Soldiers, clerks, artisans, and the women's quarters known as the harem. There she met Zara, Calawan's first wife and the ruler of the women's domain. Zara was no captive. She was a commander in her own right, running the harem with a discipline that rivaled the military itself. Every woman had a role. Every role served the household machine. Catherine's was to manage correspondence, writing letters for Zara and other senior wives, handling invitations, trade inquiries, and political communications. Her pen became her armor, her silence, her shield. The first month was peaceful, almost safe. The work was dull but dignified, and boredom, Catherine realized, was the greatest luxury in captivity. But peace rarely lasted long in the world of the Mamluks. Catherine's tranquility ended the day Calawan's third son turned 18. The boy's education, his father decided, was incomplete. He had learned war, governance, and scripture, but not what Mamluk society called household management. That term concealed a brutal truth. In elite households, young men were educated by designated women, trained in intimacy and control as part of their social grooming. One evening after the final prayer, Zara summoned Catherine. Her voice was calm, her words rehearsed. "This is an honor," she said. "It reflects trust in your training. Resistance would be seen as failure." Catherine didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had already seen what happened to women who failed their training. From that night forward, twice a week, Catherine received visits from Calawan's son. The meetings were scheduled, clinical, unromantic. They followed patterns she had been taught. Her role was clear, present but detached, compliant but never eager. She perfected the art of dissociation, separating mind from body, thought from experience. It was the only way to survive. During the day, she returned to her letters, her Arabic calligraphy admired throughout Damascus. By night, she performed the role the system demanded. To the Mamluks, she was the perfect investment, a woman who could serve both mind and body, intellect and obedience. To Catherine, she was a ghost living inside herself. 12 years passed. By then, Calawan had become sultan, and Catherine, his property, had become invisible, part of the administrative machinery that ran his empire. But something within her refused to die. On October 3rd, 1284, during the Sultan's weekly public audience, Catherine stood from her place among the scribes and spoke. The chamber froze. No woman from the harem had ever addressed the Sultan in public. She spoke in flawless Arabic. Her tone was steady. "I petition for manumission," she said. "On the grounds of 12 years of faithful service in the Emir's household, including administrative duties and instruction of new staff, I seek transfer to paid employment in the correspondence office." Silence filled the room. The Sultan studied her, then turned to his chief judge. "Is this petition legally sound?" The judge examined her documents, copies she herself had written, citing Islamic law that allowed freedom for loyal servants after long service. Finally, he nodded. "It is sound." Calawan hesitated. He could deny her, but doing so would undermine the legal system his rule depended on. He granted the petition. That afternoon, Catherine was freed. She received official documents, a modest salary, and a small room in the administrative wing. She was no longer anyone's property, yet freedom was complicated. Her homeland was gone, her family dead or scattered. Her only world was the one that had once enslaved her. Still, one truth remained. For the first time in 12 years, Catherine had chosen something for herself. Catherine's story was only one thread in a vast and terrible tapestry. For every woman who gained freedom, thousands never did. In the markets of Damascus and Cairo, human lives were traded like grain or silk. Records describe lines of women appraised by age, beauty, and skill, each sold into roles determined by the empire's needs. Some became domestic servants, others were sent to remote estates, and a few, like Eleanor of Antioch, entered elite households after months of specialized training. Each pathway ended the same way, with erasure. Even those who adapted, women like Isabella of Tripoli, who served households for decades, lived behind the invisible bars of obedience, and those who resisted, like Marguerite of Jerusalem, were crushed or broken until even hope became a tool of control. Yet generations later, the system left more than scars. It reshaped the entire region. Children born of captives and conquerors filled Damascus and Cairo, their bloodlines merging until distinction faded. The system had achieved its goal, the transformation of populations. The Mamluks' genius for administration built roads, cities, and armies. But it also built an empire of silence, one that buried the pain of tens of thousands beneath polished bureaucracy. The documents survive. The women's voices echo through them, faint, fragmented, but undeniable. Catherine of Acre, Isabella of Tripoli, Eleanor of Antioch, Marguerite of Jerusalem, Anna of Damascus. Their names endured when the empire that enslaved them crumbled to dust. They deserve to be remembered, not as faceless victims, but as human beings who lived, suffered, and defied erasure. Because the true horror of history isn't chaos, it's order, cold, systematic, and efficient. And understanding that truth is the only way to ensure it never happens again.